What's going on, guys? This is Kaisha. Welcome back. So we are back with another video. On this video, we're going to cover the OCG metagame tier list post Infinite Forbidden or post info. So recently we had our new product. Last Saturday, it dropped in the OCG market. We have Infinite Forbidden available for us, and there's a new format that awaits for us. And I think this will be a very pivotal tool and informative video for us to identify which decks are going to see play and traction post info, and I think most people are still not solved or convinced on what are the best decks to play on the format, because the format is wide open for a lot of decks to shine and conquer the format. And as you can see, this is a very diverse metagame on our firm grasp of new format. And yeah, moving on, we have the tier list from Rai_10Y on his X and Twitter account, and as usual was posted by ESDR's Facebook page. So thanks again to them for providing quality OCG content. So moving on towards our tier list, we have S, A, B, C, and D. We will start first on D tier as usual. So coming at off the bat, we have Adamantipator with Millennium Engine. So Millennium Engine are seeing a lot of play from the recent tournament results from the Saturday and Sunday local tournaments, and also the YCSJ, the biggest tournament in TCG in the history with 8,000 players. There's a lot of decks that are running the Millennium Engine. There's the Snake Eyes, the Finsmith, and other decks like Adamantipator. So there's a bunch of decks that are playing this package on their deck. It improved the ceiling and overall explosiveness of the deck, and I think it's a wise choice as well to mesh this engine for the Adamantipator, because Adamantipator badly needs another engine to make them more competitive. And I think this is a solid option because Adamantipator have been hanging by the thread on the C tier or D tier on the previous tier list, but now I think this really looks solid enough to compete. And I think the only drawback is, of course, Maxi. We cannot deny that how impactful Maxi is on the OCG. So yeah, it's a bummer that Adamantipator really struggles around Maxi. And moving on towards our next deck, we have Madolche. So I think this deck is kinda good. I would rate it as a top tier rogue deck, but I'm not sure if this is enough to put them on the D tier. I can give them a benefit of doubt for now, but I think the deck is really okay as a top tier rogue deck, but I wouldn't say that the reach of this deck would go along with the metagame right now on the D tier. So I think the deck got buffed. It's more explosive and much more resilient, and yeah, I think that's the only problem of Madolche. Before, the resiliency of the deck is not that really top notch, but now I think with the new support, I think it's much more better, and we'll see where Madolche will eventually pair against the format right now. So yeah, moving on, we have Chimera. So this is a fall from grace because Chimera used to be a B or low A tier deck in the tier list of Japanese metagame, but now it dwelled down into D tier, and I think there's a lot of decks that got better and had more new support to elevate their ceiling on the format. But yeah, I think Chimera is still solid, very competitive mid-range deck, can play the Frightful package with the fusion shenanigans, and can also be versatile. You can play Branded and Horus as well. So I think there's a lot of rooms for experimentation for Chimera to be able to compete against the format. And you can also use the Finsmith engine to boost the Chimera. So I think it will be fine. Chimera will be here for the D tier for a very long time post-info. And next, we have a very interesting new deck on our format. We have Centurion White Woods or White Forest, I'm not really sure. So yeah, this is a new deck as well in terms of having new support and compatibility, because Centurion got buffed from this engine. And I think the only problem that my friend told me on testing this deck was, even though you use Whitewood or White Forest on the Centurion, the board or the feel on playing this deck is pretty similar to playing pure Centurion as well. So even though you add some spice and explosiveness towards the deck, I think you still end up on the standard or usual Centurion board. So yeah, that's the only problem. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough to stop the decks that are kind of explosive, like something like Fire King or Snake Eyes. I'm not really sure if it's enough to stop those decks, but yeah, it got more consistent now and more resilient as well. So I think it has a place on the format right now, to say the least. So yeah, moving on towards the C tier, we have Runic. So good old Runic, we cannot get tired of this deck. I'm really suffocated from seeing this deck for a very long time now. Runic have been the perennial C tier, D tier, sometimes B tier meta deck on the tier list, because for the fact that this is stun deck, no, most people are not really geared upon playing against stun deck. You mostly prepare against Voiceless Voice, Tenpai, Snake Eyes, and the likes of Rescue Ace. But against stun deck, you really lack some rooms on your main deck to answer the stun strategy. And on your side deck as well, you would sacrifice a lot of hand traps to play Board Wipes or Cosmic Cyclone. So I think Runic is still a very legitimate contender on the format right now, mainly to the fact that most people are not prepared against the Runic. And yeah, we cannot deny that Runic is still powerful, plays around Maxi effectively, and yeah, stuns the opponent, basically wins the game from flipping floodgates and decking out the opponent. And on top of that, it has gain 1k LP. That is very crucial on last 3 turns, or yeah, on that time period. So yeah, I think Runic is still a pretty nice option to play. And next we have Gimmick Puppet, no? So very new on our block. I didn't anticipated that Gimmick Puppet would be this good until I read the cards, and I think the cards are very solid. It has a lot of potential moving forward. Most decks are really not that good against the Gimmick Puppet matchup. Most of the decks here on the metagame really tends to struggle against Gimmick Puppet, and also Gimmick Puppet can FTK. That's one of their more covenant ways of winning the game, and can also stun and yeah, stun the opponent with the Gimmick Puppet lock. So I think this deck has a tremendous upside when your opponent doesn't know how to deal against you, and especially the new Gimmick Puppet cards are not really linear. There's a lot of ways to play those cards, and I think Gimmick Puppet would be eventually experimented and explored by more experienced players better than me, and I think they would do a good job on having a solid and standard list of Gimmick Puppet to be able to make it as a competitive deck on the meta. Next we have White Woods or White Forest. I'm not really sure on the name of this card, but yeah, I think this is a synchro deck that has good explosiveness and sealing. Can put up the Barone, the likes of something like Savage, and there's a bunch of synchro cards that you can make on this deck, and I think it's like a modern Brave Yang Zing or Adventure Yang Zing Tenyi, in a sense that it is explosive, summons a lot of times, and brings out powerful boss monsters with huge Omni-Negate threats on their board. So I think it's a very good deck to invest right now, because this is a, what do you call this, archetype lore wise supported deck by the current Yu-Gi-Oh lore, and we could expect more supports for the Sinful Spoils and the Diable Star lore, and I think this deck will eventually get better once they get new support to support the deck once more. So yeah, I think this is a very wise investment to buy on the April format. And yeah, moving on, we have Matmec Ignister. I could disagree with this one because I haven't seen enough tops of Matmec Ignister to rate it as a C tier deck. But yeah, once it works really well, and most people are not really anticipating Matmec because Matmec can set up a very powerful board and also can pretty much OTK anytime, anywhere. One card enabler to OTK the opponent, really easy on the deck. So it just plays a bunch of hand traps and yeah, kinda obliterates your board when going second. So yeah, I think this deck is solid, but I think Centurion Whitewoods is much more better than this, and I would only rate it on D tier right now. And yeah, moving on, next we have B tier. We have Unchained Fiendsmith. So this deck is the mesh together of Fiend archetypes and powerful engines. So you utilize the Yama on this deck very much often, and you use the Fiendsmith to bolster the deck. And yeah, also you set up multiple interruptions on the deck. You set up the High King Caesar rank 6 XYZ that can negate two special summons, and you use the Blue Dog, the much more favored link of Unchained. So you interrupt the opponent extensively and pretty much consistent, has a lot of rooms to combo off, and a very solid option right now to play. I think most people should definitely ponder on experimenting this deck, and yeah, I think Fiendsmith really complements the Unchained very well. And yeah, moving on the B tier we have Labyrinth Jubel. So this is the more improved version of Jubel, or rather Labyrinth right now with the Jubel. So this is like the new DPE package, or the Destroy Phoenix Enforcer in the OCG, and I think Jubel does a good job on elevating the Labyrinth. And Jubel is very tremendous, very splashable, kinda resilient as well, and has a lot of upsides to play, and a deck like Labyrinth would love to have that kind of support, and paired with trap cards that is very proactive and interactive. And yeah, with the Jubel Towering Monster, I think it's a very phenomenal deck going first. The only struggle would be, of course, Ash Blossom, and not so great going second capacity of the deck. And yeah, moving on towards the B tier, we have the Supreme King Melodious. So this is the more upgraded version of Pen Magi or Supreme King. So a very combo-ish deck, no? We couldn't say that much against this deck because very explosive. One card Dragon Shrine combo, one card Foolish Burial combo can literally make the most oppressive board right now on the format. So I think this is a very strong deck. You can overwhelm a lot of opponents when you can go first. The only problem, like the Emancipator, it struggles really bad against Maxi. And yeah, I think this deck is kinda hand trap resilient. Most hand traps are not really super effective against the deck, so you have leeways to play around them. And I think the only struggle would be just Maxi, the only problem, and sometimes Droll. But Droll is not that favored enough on the format. Most people are not playing Droll enough on their main deck or side deck even. And yeah, moving on towards the B tier, we have Memento. So Memento Tlan, I forgot the name. Yeah, we just call it Memento. So this deck got heavily supported from the info, and there's a bunch of combos and playthroughs that are seeing in the Twitter or YouTube, and there's a bunch of ways to play the deck. And the deck is very explosive when it can go snowballing out of control. Once you let this deck stomp you, I think there's no turning back. There's no really way to come back against this deck once it gets rolling. That's the only thing that I could think of against this deck. Is this is a very snowbally deck. Once it gets rolling, it's hard to stop. And I think that's a very good sort of card design for Memento, because they have been overshadowed by their counterparts on their set. So I think it's about time to see their limelight on the meta. And yeah, I think this deck is solid and kinda unexplored as well. Most people are not really investing time to test the deck, and I think more people should definitely look at this deck as a kind of deck that can definitely surprise people off guard. And yeah, moving on towards the A tier, we have Voiceless Voice. So Voiceless Voice or VV are falling off as well, no, on the metagame. Before, they used to be S tier and high A, but now they are only low A. And I think other decks are just explosive enough. And sometimes your one Skull Guardian is not that enough to stop the opponent. And on some matchups, Auravis does nothing at all. But on the contrary, this deck fares against Maxi effectively. You let your opponent draw 1, 2, sometimes 3 on a turn, and that's pretty much about it. You don't suffer that much on Maxi. And I think that's the biggest asset of Voiceless Voice right now, their ability to play around Maxi effectively, and also the protection and targeting protection of this deck is really unparalleled as well. Most decks doesn't really have that kind of luxury on them. So yeah, I think Voiceless Voice does have an advantage on that department. And yeah, I think Voiceless Voice is still solid. It's just most decks are having a very good time against Voiceless Voice once they have the right hands to play around the Voiceless Voice board. I think they can pretty much overwhelm the Voiceless Voice even going second. And yeah, moving on, we have Rescue Ace, Sinful Spoils, Snake Eyes. And yeah, I think it's pretty much deserved. This deck have been kinda overshadowed by the Fire King and Snake Eyes, their fire attribute counterparts. But yeah, I think Rescue Ace as a deck is very resilient. You have the Hydrant and Emergency to start your plays, and also the Airlifter. And also the Poplar is very immense for this deck. One Bonfire could definitely make your full board. And also, most people are not really respecting Rescue Ace enough. They are not playing Lightning Storms, Heavy Storms, and other cards that could blow out the Rescue Ace like evenly. They're not even respecting the deck, and I think that is the main reason why Rescue Ace is very high on this list. Is because most people are neglecting the potential of this deck. And yeah, I think Rescue Ace should be here for quite some time. If players would invest more on playing Voiceless Voice, I think Voiceless Voice would overshadow this. But right now, I think it's just a better option to play because there's not much targets on your back. And moving on, we have the next deck. We have Yubel, Finsmith. So another supported deck from Info. So Finsmith really complements Yubel. It adds a new dimension of playing the Yubel. You have more combo pieces and you pretty much be more explosive than ever than the standard Yubel. And yeah, with the towering presence of Yubel and the beat stick capability of this Yubel archetype mesh with the combo availability and yeah, proactive plays of Finsmith can definitely buff the deck enough to have a position on this A tier. And I think it's pretty much deserved because Yubel have been overshadowed by heroes as a GX archetype lore-wise. And yeah, I think it's about time as well to see Yubel have their limelight on the metagame. And I think Yubel is very solid. That's pretty much solid matchup against Tenpai, which is the best deck on this tier list. And I think it's one of their biggest assets to be able to play around Tenpai effectively. And yeah, next moving on, we have Fire King. And yeah, with the Volcanics, I think this is the more upgraded version of Fire King. They have opted to play the Volcanics, and yeah, I think it's getting traction as well. The Volcanics inclusion on the main deck of Fire King, Snake Eyes, and Full Spoils. So yeah, I think this deck is still very solid, no? Because Fire King have been dominant on the previous formats. And yeah, it pretty much stay the same because even though other decks got buff, I think Fire King have a very huge upside on the previous format, and I think other decks are just getting scrambled and catching up with them right now. It's their only time to catch up with Fire King, and Fire King have been perennial best deck on the format on the previous months. So I think yeah, it's still a solid option. You can go to big events using this deck, and you would pretty much do fine. And yeah, moving on towards the S tier, we have the Snake Eyes, Millennium, Finsmith. So a very powerful deck. By the looks of it, it's really powerful. On my own perspective, I would rate it higher than Tenpai. But overall, I think Tenpai is much more available on the format because it's more accessible and budget friendly. But yeah, I think Snake Eyes is a very tremendous deck. I would definitely pick up this deck if you want raw power and raw ceiling. You have the highest ceiling on this game, and you have the most explosive plays, and also you still have rooms for hand trap on this deck. So yeah, I think it's the biggest asset of the Snake Eyes, being able to play 15, 12, sometimes 18 hand traps. But with Finsmith and the Millennium, you add more powerful engines towards the deck, and Snake Eyes is already a very consistent deck. Paired with Finsmith and Millennium, it goes really long way. You have the best consistency out there in the meta right now. So I think that's the bread and butter of the Snake Eyes, being able to play a lot of plays on their turn and having the consistency to be able to set up a decent amount of board anytime and anywhere. So I think that's the very solid pick up right now on the format. And moving on, towards the best and last deck on our tier, we have Tenpai Dragon. So Tenpai Dragon is heavily played on the YCSJ. You would definitely see X1, X2 tops of Tenpai on the X and Twitter, and I think it's kinda self-explanatory because BO1 is the name of the game on YCSJ. You only play one game, so Tenpai is a solid deck to play on that environment. But moving forward, I think Snake Eyes would eventually overcome this Tenpai. The only support is the Genroku in the new card, one card combo of Tenpai, but most people are not playing that Dora Dragon. I forgot the name. Yeah, with the Genroku, they play 2-3 copies, sometimes 1 on the main deck. So it's up in the air right now whether Tenpai players would experiment with Genroku as 1 or 2 or even 3 on the main deck. But right now, it's still a very solid deck. Budget, very easy to use on terms of skill set and smoothness of this deck. You don't really need to think so much and combo of really immense value of your brain energy on playing this deck. But yeah, you pretty much draw your hand traps, interrupt your opponent, and go for OTK. That's pretty much sums up the game of Tenpai right now, and it's very consistent on doing that. That's the biggest asset of Tenpai, being able to go second and play comfortably on their own accord and tempo. So yeah, I think it's a quality of a top tier deck right now on the format. So yeah, so that sums up our OCG metagame tier list post Infinite Forbidden. So once again, thank you for watching this video. I hope you do learn something from this video. Please drop a like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and see you in the next one. Peace.